It's early morning, and so of course it's Miller time for the cats. So please do not be surprised if you see some activity going on behind me. Um, but I want to talk about types of conflict, and I think it's important to know about these types of conflict because I think I can give you a little bit of insight on how to resolve some of them, but then also to realize that sometimes what we think is one kind of conflict is actually a different kind of conflict. All right. Pseudo conflict, these are kind of the all in good fun arguments. Maybe you've argued about sports or you've argued about movies. I know one of my favorites is, the idea of could Superman beat Thor in a fight? Or Hulk, which I think Hulk could totally beat Superman, but that's another day. But I mean, those kind of arguments are pseudo conflict. It's not real argument. However, if there are underlying issues in the relationship, a pseudo conflict can quickly devolve into ego conflict, into a place where we're really actually having a fight. And so if you are, and sometimes like I'm friends with a lot of nerds, I know, surprising no one. But if and so we get really into things that do not matter at all. And I have actually seen these kind of conflicts deepen and damage relationships because people start fighting in a way that isn't kind, or they start like touching at somebody's insecurities or something like that. And so just be aware that sometimes pseudo conflict can devolve real quickly into something that's harmful. This is the same thing with teasing and kind of play fighting. In a relationship that's not strong, condescension or derision can actually be a sign of relationship decay. And so just be aware that those can be major issues if we're not careful, right? Fact conflict is when the actual information is in dispute. And that is essentially like, if in an interpersonal scenario, it might be something like, you said you would take out the trash and you didn't. I never said I would take out the trash. Like that kind of a fact conflict. Or in a workplace, it might be, hey, your department was supposed to be responsible for this. Well, no, your department, see, told you. No, your department was supposed to be responsible. You can almost always see, and then of course my favorites are the ones on Facebook where someone will post an article and someone will go, no, that's not true. And like, they do this. I think that things like conspiracy theories, are often fact conflicts. Anytime where someone might go, oh, that's fake news, that's usually a fact conflict. Now, here's the thing that's really important about fact conflicts. And you can always tell you're in a fact conflict when people start pulling out their phones and Googling or trying to find that agenda that somebody said something in. Here's the thing. Sometimes fact conflict is fact conflict, and you just have to, deal with it and move on. If it was, I said I would take out the trash, I don't remember, I forgot. My husband says, hey, you said it, I have it on the thingy. I say, oh, I did, I'm sorry, I will fix it for the next time. No big deal. But when people fixate on it, they go, nuh-uh, or I don't care what this says, or you start seeing that pushback. And I think that's especially true for conflicts, especially online, where someone says, I don't believe that source. I don't know why, but I'm thinking of like the vaccine conflict, like the vaccines causing autism thing that you see online so much. I don't believe your source. Da 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 da. A lot of times you're not actually dealing with fact conflict. You think you're dealing with fact conflict because someone's arguing about a fact, but that fact is being held because of a belief or an attitude or a moral. And that's value conflict. And so a lot of times fact conflict is masquerading. So if, finding the evidence or restating the fact is not working, realize that that's not the conflict you're in. You're in a different conflict and you just don't realize it. So that's fact conflict. You got to kind of know when it's starting to devolve. Value conflict is so much harder to resolve. And I think that that's one of the reasons why when we're in what we think is a fact conflict and we're starting to see that pushback against the information, why it shocks us and why we start immediately villainizing people who deny the facts that we present. Because we're like, how can you not think that? How do you not understand me? Because I am holding this fact because it is covering or it is supporting my belief, my attitude, or my morals. Okay. And these are the things that are the hardest by far to change. All right. Value conflicts are so hard because a lot of times, if I disagree with you, instead of me thinking that I disagree with you, it's you're wrong or bad for holding that belief in the first place. You know, if I'm in favor of paid sick leave for part-time workers or guaranteed sick leave for part-time workers, and you're against it, and you might be against it because you're afraid it's going to tank small businesses or it's going to be too expensive, and I'm in favor of it. And it's and realize that sounds like a fact conflict, right? It sounds like, actually, it sounds like a policy conflict, which we'll talk about in a second. I might say, okay, wait a second. No, that's really important to me because I teach students who are essential workers who don't have access to healthcare, and I'm worried about their health, and this is really important to me. I would, instead of me saying, oh, okay, well, you know, I disagree with your stance on this policy, I might say, you don't care about things. You care about money more than you care about my students. And I have to be careful with some of those kind of things because I feel myself kind of getting that self-righteousness where I'm like, argh! And I have to realize that, you know, that person that I'm arguing with, they're not evil, they're not bad, but they really have a different set of values or morals, and they're looking at this a completely different way. And so that's another thing, is know when you're in a values conflict. Usually you cannot change someone's belief, attitudes, or morals in a quick, easy bit. It's almost impossible. It takes a long time. And honestly, it takes really understanding that person's point of view. And that's a lot of work because you've got to sit there and you've got to put your own stuff aside and say, no, you know what? I need a perspective take and understand why this is important to you. And I think sometimes that whole vaccination debate is really a values conflict because someone might distrust doctors or distrust government or distrust something, or they're afraid of their child getting sick, or they're afraid of their kid getting some sort of disability. And so that fear is driving that, you know, desire. And so they're covering that fear with all of this information and fact, but it's actually a belief or an attitude here. And so that's something that's really important when you're in these kind of conflicts. A policy conflict is also one of those things that can be masking a values conflict. A policy conflict is when you are disagreeing about what action somebody should take. So for example, I mean, and this is a stupid conflict, but like, I think we should take our vacation at the beach and my husband thinks we should take it in the mountains. Well, that's technically a policy conflict where our action is in dispute. In a business setting, it might be, you know, should we close or should we stay open? When should we bring people back to school, for example? That would be a policy conflict if there were two people at odds. And again, remember, policy conflict can also masquerade as a value conflict. To resolve policy conflict, one of the best things you can do is take everybody's ideas for action, put them on the table, and then vet them according to a decision-making guideline. And we'll talk about that in the next section when we talk about groups. That can be super useful to kind of help people. Usually when it comes to policy conflict, the most important thing is that somebody feels like their idea for action or their desire is heard. Once that happens, then that can be a really good, that can be something that helps people move and accept something that isn't their idea in the first place. So that's policy conflict. The last one is ego conflict. And ego conflict is when you have these disagreements about, these disagreements that attack somebody's sense of self, So that's why we call them face disagreements. Hopefully you've read that in the book, the idea of saving face. But like, you know, and that's kind of where pseudo conflict can sometimes become ego conflict. Where if I feel like I'm being embarrassed, or if I feel like my reputation or my sense of self or who I am as a person is being attacked, then you're going to see defensiveness go up, and you're going to see a lot of those problems happen. So I hope that this helps with, and if you get ego conflict, the best thing to do is kind of back away, make sure that you're being respectful in how you're arguing, and then sometimes it's good just to disengage and say, you know, I think I think you're right. I understand your point of view. Or I understand your point of view. I don't know if I have everything I need to continue this conversation or something like that. You're like, disengage. It can always be helpful. So I hope that this helps you understand the different kinds of conflict and how to address them. All right. See you in the next video.